The galaxy had always mocked the humans. To the Council of Worlds, Earth was a backwater sphere of violence and chaos, a biological anomaly that should have gone extinct long ago. Its gravity was too high, its atmosphere too volatile, its weather patterns suicidal. The fauna were killers, the flora venomous, and the sentient species, well, the sentient species had nuked their own skies before inventing faster-than-light travel. To most of the galaxy, that was proof enough. Humans were mad. Dangerous, yes, but primitive. And like all primitive things, they were meant to stay in their corner of the stars. The Varelian Empire, proud rulers of the spiral's core sectors, made certain of it. For decades, they kept humanity hemmed behind the Dead Zone treaties, mocking their world on every broadcast, labeling them Deathworld rejects. Their propaganda networks filled the void with laughter and disdain. Hollow shows called Savages of Sol depicted humans as drooling berserkers gnawing on bones. It became an entire genre of entertainment. And the humans? They said nothing. For 50 years, Earth remained silent. No ambassadors, no protests, no words. The galaxy mistook that silence for submission, until the day the Varelians decided to invade the Kuiper colonies. It was supposed to be routine, a containment strike, they called it, show of dominance, a reminder to the lesser races that the core world still ruled the rim. The Varelian fleet, bright and golden, entered Sol's outer rim like gods descending upon barbarians. They burned the first mining station out of existence in under 10 seconds. Over 2,000 colonists, humans mostly, were vaporized before the Council could even process the alert. Then came the message that changed history. It wasn't transmitted in Varelian code, nor through the Council's diplomatic frequencies. It came through a human military channel that no one even knew existed anymore. One phrase in calm, uninflected Terran standard. Acknowledged. Response in progress. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a revelation. The Varelians detected them first as faint gravitational ripples at the edge of the Kuiper belt. Mass displacements too large for warships, too irregular for asteroids. Then came the power signatures. Hundreds, then thousands, igniting across the black like a chain of awakening suns. When the human fleet decloaked, the galaxy learned what 50 years of silence had built. They weren't sleek or graceful, not like the curved gold of Varelian warships. Human vessels were black, jagged, brutal things. Machines that looked more like predators than ships. Armor plates layered over armor plates. Magnetic rail mounts bristled across their spines. Hulls scarred by atmosphere re-entry and old wars. They were not built for beauty. They were built for survival. The Varelian Admiral Lord Serath laughed when he saw them. "Scrap metal," he sneered to his bridge crew. "Let's remind the savages who rules the stars." He never got the chance. When the human fleet fired, it wasn't with plasma or particle beams. It was kinetic. Slugs of tungsten the size of buildings traveling at fractions of light speed. No energy trails, no heat signatures, just invisible death that arrived before sensors could react. 3 Varelian cruisers ceased to exist in the first salvo. A fourth was torn in half as its shields overloaded. The fleet's formation shattered, their communication grid collapsing under electromagnetic interference so dense it fried every relay. The humans didn't jam signals, they erased them. The Varelians tried to retreat. The humans didn't chase. They didn't broadcast demands. They just sent one message, repeated on every open frequency. "You brought war to our system. We'll bring gravity to yours." The galaxy laughed no more. 3 weeks later, the invasion began. The Varelian homeworld of Kelrath had never known war. For centuries, its crystal spires and floating cities had been the symbol of galactic civilization. Gleaming towers reaching into soft amber skies, surrounded by oceans of living light. They had forgotten what fear looked like. Until the sky split open. The first human dropships broke atmosphere like meteor storms, their hulls glowing white-hot as they tore through defense grids. The Varelians fired everything they had: plasma batteries, orbital cannons, atmosphere shields. But the humans kept coming. Their entry paths were calculated down to microseconds, their armor absorbing and dissipating energy that would have vaporized most ships. When they hit the ground, the world itself trembled. From the smoke walked figures in dark exosuits, faces hidden behind black visors, each movement precise, deliberate, mechanical. They didn't speak. They didn't taunt. They advanced with the cold inevitability of gravity itself. Virelian troops broke formation almost immediately. The humans didn't fight like anyone they had ever faced. They didn't seek cover or retreat. They used the terrain like predators, turning every crater, every wall, every shadow into a weapon. When the first human-heavy unit, a Titan-class mechanized trooper, rose from the dust, 3 stories tall, carrying a plasma harpoon in one hand and a rail cannon in the other, the Virelians realized what they were facing. These weren't soldiers. They were survivors. Every human who fought had been shaped by a world that killed the weak. Kelrath's capital fell in under 24 hours. The council demanded a ceasefire. The humans didn't respond. They didn't occupy. They didn't colonize. They simply walked through the burning ruins, collected their fallen, and transmitted a single file to every major broadcast network in the galaxy. A visual of Earth. Mountains split by rivers of lava. Storms the size of continents. Creatures that could crush tanks with their jaws. A planet where everything that breathed was lethal, and everything that lived was a weapon. Then came the voice. Calm, female, unmistakably human. "This is Earth," it said. "You called it savage. You called it unworthy. You laughed. But every blade of grass, every drop of water, every heartbeat on this world fights to survive. You see monsters. We see home. And when you brought your war to us, you reminded us what survival means." The broadcast cut to footage of the burning Virelian capital, then faded to black. The message ended with 6 words. "Do not mistake silence for weakness." Across the galaxy, chaos erupted. Some species called for revenge. Others demanded peace. Most simply went quiet, realizing what they had awakened. But deep within Earth's command nexus, the black network of bunkers beneath the Antarctic ice, Admiral Juno Thane stood before a holographic projection of the stars. Hundreds of red sectors glowed where human forces had already deployed. They weren't invading. They were neutralizing. Every system that had mocked, enslaved, or hunted them now fell under Earth's shadow. Her eyes, gray and cold, scanned the map. "Status of Kelrath?" she asked. "Stabilized," her aide replied. "Civilian casualties heavy. No further resistance." "Good," she said quietly. "Begin reconstruction. We'll leave them alive. Let them tell the story." The aide hesitated. "And the council, Admiral? They're calling for negotiations." Thane's lips curved slightly. Not a smile exactly, but something colder. "They wanted to laugh," she said. "Let them learn to whisper instead." She turned away from the stars. "Prepare the next operation. The rim worlds are next." Outside, the aurora of Earth danced against the night, reflecting off the hulls of warships waiting in orbit. The Deathworlders had awakened, and the galaxy that once mocked them was about to learn what true fear meant. Because the children of Earth did not conquer for glory or for power. They did it for the same reason they had done everything since crawling from the mud. Because survival was in their blood, and evolution had taught them one simple truth. The only safe world was one that belonged to them. The Virelian homeworld burned for 13 days before the smoke cleared. Ash drifted across their golden seas like snowfall, turning the crystal waters gray. The towers that once reflected the suns of the core now lay shattered, glass bones jutting from the ruins of their cities. The air reeked of ozone and scorched metal. For the first time in their long, sheltered history, the Virelians understood what a Deathworld's fury truly meant. When the humans withdrew, they did not loot. They did not enslave. They did not raise banners. They simply left behind silence. Whole cities stood empty save for the echo of boots that had passed through. The Virelian military command was gone. Its orbital arrays turned to slag, its admirals missing or dead. What remained of their leadership hid underground, sending panicked transmissions into the void, begging for aid. The Council of Worlds convened an emergency session within the span of hours. Representatives from 100 species filled the circular chamber on Tereth Prime, their holograms flickering above the great marble floor. Voices collided like waves, accusations, demands, denials. The Varelians blamed the humans. The border worlds blamed the Council. The Council blamed no one. Fear had replaced pride, and none of them knew what to do. Humanity's actions cannot be tolerated, shouted the Varelian speaker, his crystalline body vibrating with rage. They have violated every clause of interstellar law, every treaty. Law? Interrupted the Grell representative, her claws tapping the dais. You called for war first. You burned their colonies. You mocked their dead. That was a containment action. The Varelian snapped. They overreacted. The room exploded in shouts. The Hikari delegates hissed, their crests flaring. The scaled Karith stomped their tails, sending vibrations through the hall. And through it all, the human envoy sat in silence. He was a lean man, dressed in black armor with no insignia, his eyes calm, almost detached. He hadn't spoken once since the council began. When the shouting finally dulled, he stood. The room went still. Containment, he said softly, his voice carrying through the chamber like a slow, rolling tide. That's what you called it. You invaded our space. You killed our people. You laughed when the first mining station burned. And now, when we answer, you call it aggression. Vorlach, the council's presiding chancellor, folded his shimmering hands. Envoy Thane, the council seeks only to prevent escalation. Your people's retaliation has gone beyond proportion. The human looked at him for a long time. Then he smiled faintly. There's no such thing as proportion when you start a war with a death world. He turned and walked toward the exit. You want peace? He said without looking back. Earn it. The chamber doors closed behind him with a soft hiss. The council remained in stunned silence. Outside, a message was already spreading across the galactic net. The Deathworlders had spoken, and the galaxy would listen. On Kelrath, Varelian survivors watched the human ships vanish into the stars. They expected occupation, punishment, enslavement. What they got was worse. Nothing. No orders. No assistance. Just absence. The humans left their broken cities untouched, their networks dead, their skies unguarded. For the first time, they had to rebuild without their arrogance to guide them. In the ruins of the southern hemisphere, a young Varelian officer named Arian stood among the debris of a once proud academy. He had lost his entire squadron during the first orbital strike. The humans hadn't even targeted them directly. The shockwave alone had torn their ships apart. Now he stood amid the wreckage, watching the last of the fires die out. His superior approached, a weary elder, her crystalline limbs dimmed with age. They've gone, she said. Arian nodded. But they'll be back. She tilted her head. To conquer? He shook his head slowly. To finish what they started. The elder looked out at the horizon where smoke still rose in thin, curling plumes. Do you think we deserve this? Arian didn't answer. He thought of the broadcast the humans had sent, the image of their world, the voice of the woman who had spoken of survival. He had felt something strange while watching it, something the Varelians didn't even have a word for. Shame. Far away, in the cold void of deep space, the human fleet reorganized. The Terran vanguard drifted in formation near the edges of the Orion Spur, hundreds of ships orbiting a mobile fortress known as Ironhold Prime. From within its armored core, Admiral Juno Thane watched as new reports streamed in. The Varelian sectors are stabilized, her tactical officer said. Minimal resistance. Their population centers are crippled, but their infrastructure's intact. Good, Thane murmured. They'll recover. Fear is more useful than ash, her aide hesitated. Council forces are moving near the border systems. They're mobilizing. Thane turned. How many? 4 fleets, possibly 5. They're gathering near Ziergate. Let them, she said. They'll come to us eventually. They always do. She walked toward the panoramic window overlooking the fleet. The darkness outside shimmered with starlight reflecting off human hulls. Each ship bore the same insignia now, a simple black circle, no flag, no color. Just the outline of a planet surrounded by barbed orbitals. Earth. Thane spoke softly, almost to herself. They called us savages, as if the word was an insult. But savagery built us. It forged us. It made us strong enough to face anything this galaxy could throw. She turned back to her officers. Send word to the outer colonies. Full mobilization. If the Council wants to test us, they'll get their proof. The officer saluted. Aye, Admiral. When she was alone, Thane allowed herself one moment of silence. She touched the scar running across her cheek, a relic from the old wars, before Earth had gone silent. Back then, she had thought the galaxy would leave them alone. She had been wrong. Now she had no illusions left. The galaxy would never stop fearing them. So she would give it a reason too. The Council fleets gathered near the HFY Gate, a massive wormhole nexus connecting the outer colonies to the core. It was there, they decided, that humanity would be stopped. Over 2,000 ships from 12 species assembled, their banners bright, their weapons charged. They were the largest combined force the galaxy had seen since the War of Fractures, but they were waiting for an enemy that did not fight the way they did. The first human strike didn't come from the front. It came from within. Unknown to the Council, humanity had seeded the Zyre Gate's maintenance systems weeks before with nanite sleepers, disguised as communication nodes. When activated, the nodes replicated through the gate's power conduits, converting the structure into a weapon. When the Council's first dreadnought crossed the gate threshold, the Exir lattice ignited. The energy surge tore through subspace, collapsing the wormhole and dragging hundreds of ships into the singularity. For 12 minutes, the X-Wire system vanished in light. When the distortion cleared, half the Council's fleet was gone. Those who survived found themselves surrounded. Human vessels emerged from the debris field like sharks from bloodied water. They didn't transmit warnings or battle cries. They just fired. The Council fleet fractured under the assault. For every alien ship destroyed, 5 human ones fell. But it didn't matter. Humans didn't fight for balance. They fought for dominance. Inside the chaos, a single Council ship managed to transmit a partial distress signal. The footage spread across the galaxy in hours. Human ships moving through the inferno, silent and unstoppable. One of the alien captains, his voice breaking, whispered the words that would echo in every corner of known space. They don't die like we do. By the time the battle ended, the HFY system no longer existed. The gate was gone, the stars warped, the debris field stretching for millions of kilometers. The Council fleet was annihilated. Humanity didn't stay to celebrate. They left behind only wreckage and a new warning broadcast, short and simple. This is not conquest. This is correction. On Tereth Prime, the Council's leadership watched the footage in horror. Their networks went dark one by one, their economies collapsing as fear spread faster than light. Delegates fled the chambers. The Varelians withdrew from the Council entirely. The galaxy's great alliance, centuries old, fractured in a matter of weeks. Admiral Thane watched it all from the command deck of Ironhold Prime. Reports came in from across the rim. Revolts, surrenders, offers of allegiance. Every world that had once mocked them now bent the knee or begged for mercy. Thane said nothing. She only stared out at the stars, whispering words that no one else could hear. You laughed at our world, she murmured, but you've never understood it. Earth doesn't forgive. It endures. Outside, the fleet turned toward the core. Humanity's silence had ended, and the galaxy was about to learn that a death world never stops once it starts to move. The galaxy was on fire. Systems that had stood neutral for millennia now burned as the war spread from one rim to the next. Humanity's fleets moved like storms, silent, methodical, merciless. They didn't seek destruction for its own sake. Every strike was deliberate, surgical. They shattered orbital defenses, disabled supply routes, and vanished before counterstrikes arrived. The Council's admirals called them ghosts. Their soldiers called them nightmares. But those who had faced them and lived knew the truth. Humans were not ghosts. They were predators, and the galaxy had just stumbled into their hunting ground. Admiral Juno Thane stood aboard Ironhold Prime, the fortress ship now orbiting the burned-out remains of the Zyre system. From the observation deck, she watched the void twist where the gate used to be, a swirling scar of light and dark that marked the grave of the Council's pride. Her officers were tired but unbroken, their faces hardened by the months of continuous warfare. The fleet had grown since Zyre. Defectors and mercenaries from alien worlds had begun to pledge allegiance to Earth, seeing the humans not as destroyers, but as the only power capable of ending the chaos. "Reports from the frontier," said Commander Raffi, a wiry man with sunken eyes and a voice that carried exhaustion like armor. "3 more Council worlds have capitulated. The Varelian survivors are attempting to broker a ceasefire." Thane didn't turn. "They're not ready to talk. Not yet. Begging for it, ma'am. They've sent envoys through the relay net, pleading for terms. The Council's splintered. Half their fleets have gone rogue. The rest are regrouping near the core." "Good," Thane murmured. "Let them gather. One blow ends this." Raffi hesitated. "Permission to speak freely?" "Always. Some of the captains are questioning our restraint. They say we should have taken their worlds, occupied them, shown the galaxy who rules now." Thane turned, her expression unreadable. "We're not conquerors, Commander. We're consequences. And consequences don't rule. They remind." Raffi nodded, though unease shadowed his eyes. Even he couldn't always tell where discipline ended and vengeance began. Deep within the ruins of Kelrath, young Officer Arian crouched beneath the remains of an old Varelian data tower, his body shaking from exhaustion and cold. The planet was dying. The atmosphere was poisoned by ash. Crops would not grow, and the surviving cities had become fortresses against famine. But what haunted him most wasn't what the humans had done. It was how easily they could have done more. They had held back. His elder mentor, the once proud strategist Vera, had taken to studying every recorded moment of the human campaign. "They're not fighting to win," she said quietly as she replayed footage of Terran ships withdrawing from orbit. "They're teaching," Arian frowned. "Teaching what?" Vera's crystal eyes dimmed. "Fear, discipline, survival. They fight as though every battle is a lesson. And we're the students." Her words echoed in his mind as he looked up at the shattered sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, the humans were watching, waiting. The next day, a transmission cut through the static that choked their networks. The symbol was unmistakable. An Earth insignia. A circle of black surrounded by orbitals. A human voice followed, calm and clear. "This is Admiral Thane of the Terran Vanguard. Your world is under no further threat. Humanity does not annihilate those who learn. Survive, rebuild, and remember." Then silence. Arian stared at the screen long after it went dark. He realized that in those few sentences, the humans had done something no Varelian commander ever could. They had made surrender sound like mercy. The Council's remnants regrouped on Terrath Prime. The once proud capital of the Galactic Concord was now a planet under martial law. Entire fleets patrolled its orbit, while refugee ships clogged its skies like debris. In the Grand Chamber, the surviving delegates sat in grim silence as Verlac, the aging chancellor, addressed them. "The humans will not stop," he said. "We cannot meet them in open battle. We cannot reason with them. Our last chance is unity." His words fell on weary ears. Half the delegates were already looking for escape routes, their homeworlds razed or abandoned. The Varelian representative, trembling but defiant, stood. "Unity? You mean submission? You would have us kneel before the savages we mocked?" "They are no longer savages," hissed the Kareth warlord beside him. "They are the apex. The galaxy's own ecosystem has changed, and they are its new rulers." "Then perhaps we should become predators too," said another voice. It was a thin, reedy tone that belonged to a scientist from the krill species. "We've begun developing a weapon, one that might level the field." Verlac's eyes flickered. "Explain." The krill's tendrils quivered as he activated a holographic display. A massive star map unfolded, showing the spiral arm where humanity's fleets operated. "The humans rely on warp corridors and their relay network. We've identified a resonance field in their FTL drives, a signature unique to Terran engineering. If we amplify that signal and reflect it across the corridors, it could collapse their entire travel web, Vorlak finished, awe and terror mingling in his tone. Precisely. Their fleets would be stranded, their colonies isolated. It wouldn't destroy them, but it would cage them. The chamber erupted with noise. Some cried out in support, others in fear. Vorlak silenced them with a raised hand. "Then begin at once," he commanded. "If they are beasts, we will build the trap." 2 weeks later, Admiral Thane stood on the bridge of Ironhold Prime, watching the stars twist unnaturally. "Ma'am," Raffi said, his voice tight, "we're getting strange readings across the relay net. FTL paths are destabilizing. Ships are dropping out of warp. It's spreading fast." Thane's jaw tightened. "Find the source." "It's not localized, it's everywhere." The whole corridor network's collapsing. Then the lights dimmed. Alarms wailed. One by one, the ships in her fleet vanished from sensors, pulled back into real space, scattered across parsecs. The bridge crew scrambled to re-establish contact. Thane gripped the railing, feeling the vibration of the fortress as it shuddered under the gravitational flux. "They've found a way to disrupt us." Raffi turned, pale. "What do we do?" Thane stared into the churning void. "What we always do. Adapt." Within hours, communications confirmed the disaster. Thousands of Terran vessels were isolated in deep space, their warp drives useless. Entire colonies were stranded. The great Terran war machine had been split apart, not by strength, but by cleverness. The Council's trap had worked, but they had underestimated what a Deathworlder did when cornered. Cut off from command, scattered fleets began operating autonomously. Without relay guidance, human captains relied on instincts, old training, and brute survival. They navigated by dead stars, by gravity wells, by guesswork. In the void between systems, isolated units started to evolve into something new, something the Council couldn't predict. One fleet, trapped near the red giant Vornis, dismantled its own ships to build a mobile fortress from the debris. Another turned its reactors into makeshift warp bombs, detonating them to destroy pursuing Council vessels. Entire crews vanished into rogue space, waging guerrilla campaigns that turned the galactic rim into a graveyard. Every human unit became a death world of its own. Admiral Thane's fortress, Ironhold Prime, had survived, though crippled. For weeks they drifted through the void, their engines crippled, supplies dwindling. Thane refused to give up. She ordered every ship cannibalized for parts, every ounce of fuel reprocessed, every officer working without rest. "Admiral," Raffi said one night, voice hollow, "we're running out of air scrubbers and food reserves. We can't keep this up." Thane looked at the star field beyond the viewport, cold, distant, uncaring. "The Council thinks this trap will make us kneel. They've never lived through an Earth winter, have they?" Raffi frowned. "No, ma'am." "Good. Then they don't know what endurance looks like." Months passed. The Council celebrated their apparent victory. Broadcasts declared the human fleet shattered, their empire crippled. Worlds that had lived in terror began to rebuild. The fear began to fade. Until the first reports came in. A convoy of Council freighters near the outer rim vanished. Patrols sent to investigate never returned. A week later, entire systems began losing power grids as something invisible moved through their space, cutting communications, sabotaging infrastructure. Then came the transmissions, static-filled whispers, flickers of light in the void. When the Council finally triangulated the source, they discovered a single massive object moving slowly toward the core. It wasn't a fleet. It was one ship, a fortress of black metal, rebuilt from wreckage, its engines burning with the light of captured suns. Ironhold Prime. Admiral Thane was coming home. The galaxy that had laughed at humanity's savage world now trembled in silence. They had seen humanity's fury in war, but they were about to learn something far worse. They were about to see what a Deathworlder could become when left with nothing but survival. The last message before the fortress entered Council space was short, its words cold and certain. "You taught us how to build cages. Now you'll learn why Earth never stayed in one. The stars flickered, and then once again, humanity moved. The core systems had never known fear. They were the seat of civilization, the glittering heart of the galaxy, where 1,000 species had built their towers of glass and light and called themselves eternal. But eternity began to crack the moment Ironhold Prime appeared on their outer sensors. It was a fortress forged from the bones of dead fleets, its hull scarred and patched with scavenged metal, its engines burning with unstable light. The ship moved like a wounded beast, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. The Council's early response was disbelief. They'd watched the collapse of humanity's FTL network, heard reports of stranded fleets and dying colonies. They'd declared victory, even held celebrations on Tereth Prime. Now those same halls rang with alarms. Fleet Command scrambled to assemble defenses, broadcasting rally orders to every surviving warship in range. Thousands responded, their banners converging around the core like moths drawn to fire. But even among their ranks, whispers spread. They said the humans had learned to feed on destruction, that their fortress was alive, built around something ancient and terrible. Admiral Juno Thane stood at the center of her command bridge, surrounded by flickering consoles and the hum of reactors pushed far beyond safe limits. Her crew was skeletal now, barely a few thousand souls holding together a fortress meant for millions. Yet their eyes burned with something the Council had never understood: purpose. "Target signatures incoming," Commander Raffi reported, his voice hoarse. "Multiple fleets, Virelian, Hikari, Kareth. They've formed a wall around the core gate." Thane nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the holographic display before her. The enemy formation stretched across the void like a shining scar. "They've learned. For once." Raffi glanced at her. "Can we break through?" She smiled faintly. "We don't need to break through. We only need to remind them why they built that wall in the first place." She turned toward the comms officer. "Open the outer channels." Across the void, a single transmission burst through the static. It was a woman's voice, calm and steady, carrying through every fleet frequency. "This is Admiral Juno Thane of the Terran Vanguard," she said. "You called us beasts. You laughed at our world. You taught us that survival was brutality. And now you see the result. We do not come to conquer. We come to teach." No threats followed. No demands. Just silence. Then Ironhold Prime advanced. The first wave of the Council's defense opened fire. Energy beams lanced through space. Missile storms streaked toward the fortress. But humanity's engineers had learned from every battle. The fortress's shields, once vulnerable, now shimmered, with reactive plating drawn from dozens of alien technologies. Every impact fed its systems, every strike bled back into the void. The fortress answered with precision, not in volleys or saturation fire, but in brutal, efficient cuts. Entire ships vanished in a single line of plasma discharge. Drones launched. From hidden bays, thousands of them scavenged, rebuilt, and armed with intelligence cores that had once guided the Council's own fleets. They struck like a living tide, weaving through the enemy lines, tearing apart engines and reactors before self-destructing. Inside one of the Council's dreadnoughts, Captain Varys of the Hikari watched the feed in horror. The humans weren't fighting for territory. They were dismantling the very concept of opposition. Every move they made was designed not to win, but to break the will to resist. Varys turned to his lieutenant, his voice shaking. "They're fighting like they've already won," the lieutenant whispered. "Maybe they have." Within hours, the defensive wall fractured. Ironhold Prime punched through the center, dragging debris and burning wrecks in its wake. The core gate loomed ahead, a swirling blue vortex that shimmered like the surface of an ocean. It led directly to Tereth Prime, the Council's capital, the jewel of the galaxy. "Admiral," Raffi said, his tone a mix of awe and dread. "We're at the threshold." Thane stood perfectly still. "Hold position." The bridge went silent. The crew exchanged confused glances. "Ma'am?" Raffi asked. Thane's eyes softened. "If we cross that gate, we become what they always said we were. Monsters." Raffi hesitated. "After all they've done, after all the worlds they burned, do they deserve restraint?" Thane turned toward him. "Deserve has nothing to do with it. This isn't about mercy. It's about memory. The galaxy must remember what happens when it tries to cage a death world. But we don't need to destroy them. We only need to show them the edge." She gestured to the comms. "Broadcast to all frequencies. Open the records." The screens around the fortress lit up with images. Earth's surface, ancient and raw. Volcanoes spitting fire into red skies. Oceans boiling under radiation storms. Predators stalking frozen plains. Humanity's cradle revealed in all its horror and beauty. "This," Thane's voice echoed, "is where we were born. You called it savage. You called it cursed. But this world made us. Every breath we take, every scar we bear, every weapon we build, it comes from surviving this." Across the galaxy, billions watched. The transmission pierced through every blockade, every shielded network. For the first time, they saw what a death world truly meant. Not cruelty, not chaos, endurance. "You thought us dangerous," Thane continued. "You were right. But danger is only the shadow of life. And you—" Her voice hardened. "Forgot how to live." Then she gave the order. "Activate the veil." A surge of power rippled through Ironhold Prime. Deep within its core, the fortress released the experimental drive humanity had been building in secret since the collapse. The Gravatic Veil. It bent light, energy, even gravity around the fortress, creating a field that stretched across systems. Every ship, every satellite, every observer watching saw the same thing. The fortress dissolving into darkness, its form stretching and fading until it became one with the stars. The last words broadcast across the void were simple. "Earth does not conquer. It returns to the dark. Remember that." Then Ironhold Prime vanished. For weeks the Council scoured the void. No trace of the fortress remained. The wormhole gate stabilized, but sensors detected nothing beyond it. The war ended without a treaty, without surrender, without closure. Humanity had simply disappeared, leaving behind a galaxy of ruins and silence. On Tareth Prime, Chancellor Vorlak stood before the shattered window of the Council chamber. The planet was safe, yet nothing felt whole. Every world now spoke the same phrase in hushed tones. The Deathworlders had gone home. The Virelians rebuilt their cities with trembling hands. The Karith tore down their monuments and replaced them with memorials. The Hakari disbanded half their fleets. Even the merciless Graal began trading with human colonies again, cautiously, respectfully. But none dared to seek Earth. Deep in the void, somewhere beyond the mapped lanes, Ironhold Prime drifted near a dying star. Inside its hollowed decks, Juno Thane sat in silence. The ship's engines were quiet now, its crew sleeping in cryostasis. She had stayed awake, watching the red sun burn itself out, knowing that soon humanity would return. Not as conquerors, but as witnesses. Rafi's recorded message played softly beside her. "We did it, Juno. The galaxy will never forget." She closed her eyes. "That's the point," she whispered. "They'll tell stories. And maybe someday they'll stop laughing at the world that made us." Outside, the dying star flickered one last time before collapsing into a black hole. Ironhold Prime turned slowly, drawn toward the singularity, not to die, but to hide, waiting for the next time the galaxy forgot what fear was. And somewhere, light years away, on a blue and green planet orbiting a quiet yellow sun, humanity stirred once more. Factories woke. Satellites rose. The descendants of Deathworlders looked to the stars again. Because silence was never peace. It was only the breath before the next storm. The siege of Arathis burned across the sky like a dying sun. The once proud capital of the Selkari dominion lay in ruin, its towers split open by rail cannon fire, its air thick with ash and static. The alien world that had mocked Earth's savagery now trembled beneath the boots of the very Deathworlders they had ridiculed. What had begun as a campaign of intimidation had turned into a lesson in survival, one written in plasma fire and blood. Captain Elias Thorne stood atop a shattered balcony of the Imperial Palace, his armor streaked with soot and his visor cracked. Below him, columns of Terran troops moved with silent precision, drones sweeping the streets, exosuits tearing through debris to rescue survivors, enemy and civilian alike. The Selkari, for all their arrogance, were not monsters, they were just soft. And softness had no place on the worlds where humans came from. Thorne keyed his comms. "Command, this is Reaper Actual. The city's secured. Resistance is minimal. Requesting orders." The reply came with a hum of static and the calm voice of General Arden Voss, commander of the Terran Expeditionary Force. "Understood, Reaper. Begin stabilization efforts. The Council has called for surrender talks." Thorne exhaled slowly. Surrender. It was a word the Selkari had never spoken in their history, until humanity landed on their soil. The irony was brutal. For decades the galaxy had laughed at Earth, calling it the Death Nursery, mocking the species that grew up in storms and volcanoes, among predators that ate their own young. Humanity was the outlier, the mistake, the aberration that somehow crawled to the stars. Now the same civilizations that once pitied them were sending envoys wrapped in rags, begging for terms. The Terran fleet still hung above Arathis like a steel storm, its dark hulls blocking out the stars. Each ship bore the scars of battle: scorched plating, pitted armor, engines burning red from overuse. But they stood undefeated. No planet, no empire, no alliance had stopped the advance of Earth's Deathworlders since the first shot was fired. The war had begun as a joke. The Selkari thought conquering humans would be easy, a way to expand their borders and prove dominance. Instead, they had awakened something far worse than they imagined. The humans didn't just fight. They adapted. They learned. They broke every rule of war written by the so-called civilized species. And they didn't stop. Thorne walked through the streets of Arathis, his boots crunching over shattered glass. Civilians watched from doorways, eyes wide with fear. He deactivated his helmet and met their gazes directly. "No one here will be harmed," he said quietly. "This city is under Terran protection now." The words confused them. They expected cruelty, vengeance. They had seen what the Selkari armies had done on Mars, on Titan, on the colonies of Proxima. The humans had every reason to burn this planet to ash. But they didn't. Because the Deathworlders didn't destroy for sport. They fought to survive, and when survival was assured, they built. That was what the galaxy had never understood. Meanwhile, high above the planet, General Voss stood on the bridge of the TSS Resolute, staring at the incoming transmissions from the Galactic Council. Faces of dozens of alien species flickered before him, some scarred, some trembling, all humbled. The Council's high speaker, a frail amphibian whose race had once called humans feral primates, spoke in a thin, cracking voice. "General Voss, the Council convened to discuss peace. The Selkari have surrendered. The war must end." Voss didn't move. His reflection glinted in the viewport, cold and sharp. "You started a war with a world you didn't understand," he said softly. "Now you want peace because you finally do." The high speaker swallowed. "We misjudged you." Voss allowed himself a bitter smile. "No," he said, "you underestimated us. There's a difference." Back on the surface, Thorne led his platoon through the central plaza. They passed a burned-out statue of the Selkari Empress, her marble face cracked in half. In her place, human engineers were erecting temporary shelters. They worked with efficiency born of generations who knew how to rebuild after ruin. A small Selkari child stumbled toward Thorne, her hands clutching a ration pack one of the soldiers had given her. She looked up at him with frightened eyes. "Are you going to hurt us?" she asked in her trembling voice. Thorn knelt, resting a gloved hand on her shoulder. "No," he said simply. "We came to stop the hurting." The girl blinked, confused, and then ran back to her mother. Thorn stood, his jaw tight. For all their rage and strength, humanity's greatest weapon had always been empathy. As night fell, the Terran banners flew over Arathis. The once proud Dominion capital now served as the center of negotiations between the humans and the Galactic Council. Delegates arrived under heavy escort, their transports flanked by Terran fighters. They expected demands, vengeance, perhaps even slavery. Instead, General Voss offered something else, terms that shocked them all. Humanity did not want tribute. They did not want slaves or land. They wanted reform. They demanded that the Galactic Council abolish its caste systems, free the species kept as labor drones, end the ban on technological exchange. "We don't conquer worlds," Voss told them. "We liberate them from the chains you built." The council hall fell silent. For the first time in galactic history, a Deathworld species was not just feared, but respected. But peace did not come easily. There were still whispers of rebellion among the Selkari loyalists, warlords who refused to bow to humans. Thorn's battalion was deployed again and again, rooting out resistance, dismantling slave camps, breaking the last chains of an empire that had thrived on cruelty. The fighting was brutal, up close, personal. Thorn lost men, friends, brothers. Yet even in the blood and fire, something remarkable began to happen. Selkari civilians started helping the Terrans. Engineers offered blueprints. Farmers shared supplies. Children followed soldiers, mimicking their drills. The line between conqueror and liberator blurred, and Thorn felt it deeply. They were no longer fighting just to win. They were building something new out of the ashes. Weeks later, Thorn stood beside General Voss as the Galactic Council formally recognized the Terran Alliance as a permanent member, not as a vassal, but as an equal. The High Speaker's voice trembled as he recited the declaration. "From this day forth, the worlds of Earth shall stand among us, not as savages or monsters, but as guardians of balance and strength." The humans in the chamber stood silent. There was no applause, no triumphal cry, just the quiet hum of history changing course. Voss looked at Thorn, his expression unreadable. "We never asked for their approval," he said. Thorn nodded. "No," he replied, "but they needed our example." Outside, as the Terran fleet prepared to depart, the citizens of Arathis gathered to watch. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had defeated an empire without erasing it. The Selkari anthem played softly through the streets, rewritten with new verses, ones that spoke of unity and rebirth. Thorn watched from his transport window as the once broken city began to glow again under the rising twin suns. "They laughed at Earth's savage world," he murmured. But maybe savagery was just another word for strength. As the Resolute rose into the clouds, its engines casting thunder across the horizon, a single transmission echoed through the fleet channels. A new motto, born from the ashes of war. "From the world that should have killed us," the voice said, "we learned to survive anything, and now the stars will too." And somewhere deep in the void, where alien empires once mocked humanity's name, silence reigned. Not out of fear, out of respect. The Deathworlders had come, not as monsters but as the proof of what it meant to endure. And when they finally left, the galaxy watched them go, not with laughter, but with awe.